I am Dave Henning with the Fresh Start Podcast, fresh ideas for business and personal growth. And today, my guest is Kareemah Emordi. She was born and raised Muslim and converted to Christianity. She's got a powerful testimony today for us about how God's pursuit of a woman who didn't want or need their Jesus. And here you are. Welcome, Kareemah. Welcome to my program today. Great to have you.
Thank, thank you so much, Dave. And I love how you put the emphasis on their Jesus, because that's exactly how I felt about it as a born and raised Muslim. I had no parts of Jesus, not knowing that this was going to be the best thing I ever did was accept Christ into my life.
Oh, that is so fantastic. And you've done so many interesting things since then. And I have some questions to ask. Let's get started. Well,
Awesome.
you converted to Christianity some time ago. Why in the world would you convert to Christianity after being a Muslim your entire life? And I have a friend in Pennsylvania, my good Muslim buddy who I've gone to conventions in Las Vegas with and shared a room. And of course, he would pray 6 times a day and all that stuff, but really good friend. And so why did you convert?
Well, that's the interesting part, because I'm always talking about, one of the things that I love to talk about, even before my walk with Christ, was that what you say is very powerful. And I always knew that my words, had power. I didn't have a real understanding. I had like the New Age and the Universalist view of it and the Islamic view of it, but I didn't have a biblical foundation yet, because we know everything originates from the Bible, whether they tell you that or not. We know that God is not a respecter of persons, and he reigns on the just and unjust. And so I would always say that I have to go to heaven. And so I tried to live my life as a good Muslim, because my goal was to go to heaven. And one of the premises, or one of the foundations of the Islamic teachings, is that if your left hand outweighs your right hand, you go to heaven, meaning your works. If your good works outdo your bad works, then you get to go to heaven. So I lived in this constant understanding or belief or desire to make sure that I did enough good works to go to heaven, which, as you can imagine, that when you live a life of works, that is a cyclical feeling of never being good enough, never knowing if you accept it, and never really knowing if you have made it. And that's a really horrible underlying premise for any faith, because it doesn't give you freedom. And that's what I had. I had this legalistic fear that if I didn't do enough good things, but one thing I would always say is that I got to go to heaven. It's important to me. I wanted to be in paradise. And therefore, God heard my prayer. And so what I always talk about my conversion story, I mentioned the man from Caesarea that sent the servants to Joppa when Peter was on the roof. And he told the angel came and told him that God said that your alms and your good works came up to heaven. And because of that, he asked him to send someone to Joppa to get Peter, where he can bring them, his whole family. You know how Peter was resistant, I've never touched unclean things, the whole story. Therefore, I know that I was that person from Caesarea. I'm the New Testament Caesarea, because God heard my plea. He heard the words that I continually spoke. He also saw my deeds, but he also knew that he had to get me to Christ, because my words have pretty much spoken my whole life that I had to go to heaven. So it was important that he got me there. It took him some time, I've only been a Christian 10 years, and I've lived a little bit of life. However, it was so worth it, because everything that I ever been through and all the things that I know and the things that I've gone through have helped prepare me to be a bridge from not only from the Islamic society, but for people who don't know God through Christ, to be a bridge to bring them to Jesus.
That is amazing. As you have indicated, all world religions are about works as opposed to relationship.
And grace.
That's a huge deal. I've been studying about many Muslims now in the Middle East are even having, end times, visions and dreaming dreams like the Bible talks about, and they're actually being led to consider Christ.
Well, I had an experience as well. I had an actual miracle that happened. My conversion story wasn't, because God knew his daughter enough to know that I didn't want any. I had a lot of Christian friends, because at the time, I don't want to go too far in my background, but as I came to know Christ, I went through this season in my life that I was very, I won't say disheartened with Islam, but it just wasn't giving me comfort anymore. I was half the American G, but, African-American woman, making six figures, working for the Whirlpool, doing everything that everyone said should make me happy. Yet every night I would come home and I was afraid to go to sleep because I was depressed, anxiety, and suicidal, and no one knew. And I would come and put on this face of this successful Black woman because, in our community, the Black community, you don't get depressed and anxiety. That's for quote unquote rich people or other people or white women that you're a strong Black woman, so you can't, how dare you have mental issues or anxiety or depression. So I couldn't even tell anybody without looking like I was not strong, or at least that was my perception, and that was all a lie too. So anyway, you learn later on, God starts to reveal to you so many things that are just fallacies that the enemy uses to keep us divided and to keep us oppressed up under all these fake things of racial divides. And not that they don't exist, but I recognize the enemy behind why he tries to make racial divides, because it keeps your focus off the real enemy, which is Satan. So anyway, so I went through this period. I was depressed. I was calling my father. He was having me talk to different imams. I'm like, Dad, I read the Quran. I'm not getting any solace. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. I went through this period for like 2 years. And then I remember at one point I had got ulcers so bad, I couldn't even drink water. I couldn't sleep. But my sons were adults. And I was at my own condo by myself. And the only time, and I didn't watch television, but it got so bad that I was afraid to close my eyes because I was calling the ambulance at least 3 times a week and no one knew, going to the hospital thinking I was dying, having anxiety attacks, hyperventilate, the whole 9 yards, and then go to work in the morning like nothing happened, and then go through the cycle again. And by that point, I couldn't even drink water. I would have so many ulcers and so much pain. But only time I ever got any peace was I started to turn on television on at night, but mostly it was there for decoration. But the only time I got peace was when I would turn it on to those Christian channels and those pastors. I can't say I was necessarily listening to what they said. I just remember consistently the only time when I woke up, that was always the channel where it was on. Like that was the only thing, because I stopped sleeping in my bed. I was afraid to go in there. I was in my other room with a TV room. And the only time I could fall asleep was during those times. So it gave me a peace. And I didn't connect it at first, but eventually I'm like, okay, let me turn it on that. And so I was sneaking. I'm like, look, I'm an adult in my 40s in my own place and sneaking watching television, and no one's there watching Christian television, because it was like I had this fear. Oh my God, I'm watching this Christian television. It's actually helping me. What am I doing? Okay, long story short, I had a friend of mine who was a devout Christian. She worked for the corporation I did, another nonprofit arm of the Whirlpool at the time. And I called her the Teflon Don. Her name is Rose Hunt. And the reason I called her that, because I watched her. She worked in community development. I worked in the education arm. And she would have, when you work in community development with poor countries, working with poor communities, working with corporate entities to try to bring some change in the community, you always see these things that is always drama. That was her life, dealing with community development. And so she would say things like, I just make the enemy my footstool, or God is going to fight my battle. And I'm telling you, I will watch her things, said about her, horrible things in meetings. And literally the next day, it would just like dematerialize. Like, I'm like, what is going on? Now, she didn't know I was watching her life. And this is an admonition for everyone. People who don't know Christ, we're watching you. We may not ever say anything, but I watched her life. All of my friends that were Christian before, I didn't want anything to do with their Jesus, because they may have had money, but they were miserable or, cheating on each other. All those things that don't make you want their Jesus, because that's how I looked at it. But her life, and she wasn't preaching to me because she knew I was Muslim. She was very respectful. Matter of fact, she lived in the condo over me. I was watching her life. And I was like, what is going on with this woman? Why does, no matter what happens, she just gets out of it, or people just leave her alone, and she would just be casual. Oh, I'll just make the enemy my footstool. Or, well, God got my back. He fights all my battles. Oh, I'm going to pray for him. I'm like, pray for him. They just did da, 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 da. And she said, I'm going to pray for him. And I just couldn't understand it, because I'm like, in the Islamic, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. I'm getting you. This is how we roll. I want to let you, I can keep going. So I'm going to let you, if you have anything.
That is, yeah. And I want to make a point here, because it's what you said it's real. Like, even as a Christian, a Christ follower, you can't blow off the fact that the Apostle Paul had anxiety. So, and these things are real. These are not like blame it on the devil. No, these are real things that happen to us emotionally, and we need to recognize that. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. They're real. They're demonically influenced, but they're real. And that's the whole part that you have to not tell people that it's not real, because it was real. Like you couldn't get any more real than what I was going through. So moving forward, I would watch her and I would just be like, I didn't know I won't say envious in a negative way, but I envied her God, because I'm like, how is it? And she didn't know I was watching her. So like I said, always, your life is a testament. I always ask people, if your life was the only Bible someone got to read, what would it tell them about Jesus? And her life told me about a Jesus I had never experienced with other people's lives I was watching, though they didn't know I was watching them. And so anyway, fast forward, she invited me to her church one day. Now, I used to speak in churches all the time because of the work that I did. I would always get invited. I was very active in the community, very well known. So, but it was more of, I'm going to go speak in a church. That's what I do. That's part of my job. It wasn't that I'm trying to get joined, whatever. But it was just part of what I did in different careers I've had. And so I remember, and I only went because of my respect for her, because her pastor was a young white guy. She left her sister's church to go help him open a church in an all-Black community. And I had a lot of disdain for that. I'm like, here's another white pastor going to come save all the Negroes. And that was my thought process then. Because that was, in my mind, we would always say, oh, they're going to give them a Bible and brainwash them. That was the way I believed at that time. Clueless, totally clueless. But I didn't think I was clueless. I thought I was evolved in my thinking, like deceived, basically. And so I only went out of respect for her. I went to the church that day. Now, I just knew that I was going to go to church out of respect for her. I thought she didn't know, but I found out later that she could sense spiritually, which I didn't know anything about. Her discernment knew that I was going through something, though I never shared it with anyone. So I went to the church, and it was a nice message. It was cool. I wasn't particularly impressed with the message. I was just trying to be, cordial and friendly, because, I liked her. She was an older woman. She was very, and I was, and secretly trying to figure out what was going on, how she was able to do all this stuff she's able to get out of or whatever. And she didn't know, at least I didn't think she knew about all the stuff I was going through, but they had you fill out an envelope and put in your offering. At the very end, they didn't have take an offering. You just take the envelope, put it in the bucket on your way out. But on the back of the offering envelope, it says, do you have a prayer request? Because I was having so many challenges with my life, I said, God, I need you to show yourself up. But I wasn't talking about Jesus. At least I didn't think I was. And so now you got to understand, I have been to so many churches over my career, 20 years, many, many. And they all have you fill out something about prayer requests that I had never gotten a call back in all those years, which that's another admonition to the church. Guys, when we say we're going to do something, call people back. Actually, they could probably use it. We do it at my church now. But I got a call from the pastor. Now, of course, I didn't have his number, so I didn't pick it up, and I listened to his message. I was like, okay, he wants to talk to me. He saw my prayer request. And at that point, I was kind of desperate and just wanted to talk to somebody, even though I didn't want his Jesus. I just kind of wanted counseling, anything, because at this point, I'm afraid. I'm in panic mode all the time. I started to even have panic attacks at the office, and no one knew, and I had to get up because I actually ran the office, so I had a little bit more freeway to do what I wanted to do. But it was just getting crazy. And so I met with him and I called Rose, and she said, please, it's my pastor. Don't be disrespectful. I was a very disrespectful person, but she said, don't just dismiss him, basically. And so I went to the meeting, and he gave me this book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. I need to get a commission for all the books I have gotten that man. So
yes, I know Lee Strobel. Yes, I know who that is.
Okay, so that book. So he talked to me. He didn't really pressure because he already knew. And so I didn't know behind the scenes, I was very well known, very popular, very had a lot of influence in my community. And they were already strategizing, if we get Kareemah, when God gets her, because they knew they had been praying, because she had told the church to pray for me, because she knew I was going through something. She didn't know what. She said, but if we get her, it's going to get a whole bunch of people to Christ, because she's a well-known Muslim. She's well-known. And they're going to believe her because they're going to know that she didn't want anything to do with us. But if she converts, it's going to be a big deal. So I was basically like the man of peace. They wanted to catch me as the well, the person. Okay, we're going to get her. I didn't know any of this now. I'm just going through. So anyway, I got home, read the book. I called my father and told him, Daddy, now this was my biggest fear because I didn't want to be disowned, you know, it was very serious. I was very fearful. I said, Daddy, I think I'm sorry. My father just passed about 5 weeks ago. So it's still really fresh for me. I said, Daddy, you know, I'm really thinking about this Christianity. I don't know, Daddy. It's just something. I've read this book, and I just remember my father saying, daughter, you're going to always be my daughter. And that's all I needed. And so he gave me the freedom. He didn't want to say take it, but he didn't want me to ever think for 1 second that even as staunch as he was as a Muslim, that he was going to disown me. Now, subsequently, I got my father saved and he went to heaven. So that's a whole other conversation. Maybe another time I come back. So anyway, so I read that book, and because I had been having these horrible ulcers and in this pain, I had waited 6 months to get into the specialist gastroenterologist. That's kind of, you know, world renowned, or at least nationally renowned. And so I had an appointment with him to go see him one day. Finally, after waiting almost 6 months to get in, because like I told you, I'm in so much pain all the time now because of these ulcers and panic. And I had to go there to the office. And at the time, my windshield wiper on the driver's side was broken. I hadn't gotten it fixed. Women, we have to do better. We let stuff go until we absolutely need it. And then when it's time, we're like, okay, but I'm kind of glad I let that one go because it couldn't happen this way. So I'm driving to the doctor's office for this appointment. And the rain just starts and breaks out into a monsoon. When I tell you, like, that kind that even if I had both my windshield wipers, I couldn't have seen anything, but I couldn't because I didn't have, and I almost hit a car, so I had to pull off the road. Now, you know, this is the kind of appointment, if you miss it, you got to wait until they can get you back in, which could be 6 months. At this point, I'm desperate. And I pull into the Walgreens parking lot, and I'm like, okay, I'm listening to this CD of gospel songs because I'm a worship leader, and I've been singing my whole life. And I always like Christian music because they have the best singers. I'm like, I loved it. So I didn't listen to it for the gospel part. I listened to it because I love the voices and the music. And so she made me the CD. So I was listening to that going to the doctor's office. I pulled into the Walgreens parking lot. It's like a deluge of water that's coming down. And I'm like, I cannot be late. You can't be late for these appointments. It's hard to get in. And I'm like stressing out, like, okay, I got to get to this appointment. And I'm still like another 10 miles away. And it's raining this hard. I'm like, I will be late if it doesn't stop. And so I don't know what came over my spirit, but I said, God, if you're God, stop the rain and get me safely to the doctor's office. And the rain immediately stopped. And if you had to be there, it wasn't like a trickle, it stopped completely. And so I looked at my windshield, and there's like beads of water. Like I had this kind of windshield that beat it up. And as I looked at it, it disappeared. And so I pull out and I'm driving, Dave, and I'm looking around like, did it stop for everybody? Because at this point, I'm just completely freaked out. I just asked the rain to stop and it stopped. And I'm like immediately, and it's not even really scientifically possible for rain to stop that fast that's coming down that hard. It just doesn't happen. So I'm driving and I'm driving. And I'm like looking around and I'm like in this state of like, what just happened? But I go into I'm about to pull into the parking lot of the doctor's office. And of course the enemy comes back. Well, you didn't say if it's God of the Islamic God or Jesus. Like, well, how do you know? You said God, if you're God, how do you know it's not your God? Meaning the Muslim God, you know, the one of Prophet Muhammad. So that came to me and I know it was the devil now, but that was like, oh my God. So because he could feel me like, okay, I'm convinced. But then I get there and I say, God, if this is Jesus, start the rain. If it's not, stop it. 1 second, maybe 2, and it started back up. But in my hot mind, I heard, well, it took 2 seconds. And as I thought the thought, I heard a voice. It's the only time I heard an audible voice. Now I hear God's voice all the time, but I heard a voice as loud as I'm talking to you say, you asked me for confirmation and still you doubt me. And I'm in my car by myself. Whew. Even to this day, I get chills thinking about how that happened. And only thing I did was I started to cry and I called Rose, my friend, and she started to scream. and shout because they had been praying. I didn't know they had been having night vigils praying for me. The next day, November 17th, I went to the church in the back office with Pastor Brian and Rose, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I have been on fire from that moment on. That's my story.
Oh my goodness. I was at the last ever crusade of Billy Graham in his hometown of Charlotte years ago, and it was youth night. And it was in the big Panthers football stadium, and it was raining. And so there was umbrellas up all over the place. And they had all the youth bands, and Michael W. Smith was the last youth singer there, and I think DC Talk and these other bands were there. And Michael's job was to introduce Billy Graham. He introduces Billy Graham. Billy Graham walks out. The rain stops like that. And the umbrellas came down. It did not rain again all that evening, and thousands of people came forward to accept Christ. So your rain story, I saw it in person myself. I've had situations where God actually told me one time, Dave, it's either all of me or all of that. And you choose. And that was the words that I heard for myself in my own life years ago on the last Sunday in January of 1972, when God told me to give up smoking weed.
Wow. I went through that
anyway,
in my life too.
Anyway, this is your story. So I know you are a poet, you're a filmmaker, you're an author, and you've got this Relevance show. This 30 minutes is going by so fast. So tell me about the Relevance show, and you've got something really exciting coming up in a couple of months, a TV station. Wow. Let's talk about that real quick. Well,
yeah, No Walls TV was God actually gave me the vision for it, not at that name and that specificity, maybe like a year after I became Christian. And one thing I didn't know, I believe I still had that works mentality. So I tried to make it happen. And because I had money, I'm going to do these things. Of course, it didn't happen because I realized now God had to walk me through some things. He had to process me. He had to give me the word of God. He had to get me rooted and grounded, because then I'll be able to face the battles. But No Walls Television is the television that people that you've been waiting for. It's going to bring Christ into your home, because God is everywhere that we are. And so that's what No Walls Television Network is all about. It's going to be having a few sermons, but we have lots of networks that have sermons and messages. This is going to be creative. Christian sitcoms, comedy shows, cartoons with superheroes, Christian superheroes, everything that you see on mainstream television, but from the biblical or from a Christ-centered perspective. We love sitcoms, we love comedy, we love reality TV, but it's not going to be to glorifying the Satan, and his work is going to be glorifying God. Now, will it be preachy? No. Will some be? Yes. But it's going to be us out loud and proud about being Christians, and that everywhere we are, God is. And that's what No Walls. So we're taking him out of the walls of the church, and we're allowing him to breathe life like he does every single day. So I'm calling it, and I just coined this myself, I'm calling it marketplace television, because that's what it is. It's marketplace television. I've never heard that before. God gave me that. This is what you're doing, Kareem. I want you to do marketplace televisions, because I'm everywhere. And I need you to get me out of the walls. And I want them to see all the creativity that the enemy has used for his good. It all came from Christ. Nothing that no one is doing on television came from them or from the enemy. And so we have to stop saying tisk, tisk. We have to create a platform for God to have no walls. And that's what No Walls TV is about.
I'm laughing because when I was going to seminary in Kansas City, I got my first professional radio gig. The morning show was the first contemporary Christian music station ever. And I'd been a janitor at the school, and I resigned my job because I had this dream job of being a DJ. And there was a song out back then called "Why Does the Devil Have All the Good Music?"
Wow. And that's the truth.
But we talked before the show about what God revealed to me was that very thing that you're calling this, and that is the No Walls TV, because the church is not the four walls of the church. We are the church. We, the people, are the church. And there's an amazing thing that happens in Christ between all the different cultures and colors and everything else, where I'm colorblind.
Right.
In Christ, I love everybody. And that's
one
not,
new man.
And that's not me. That's obviously what the Holy Spirit has done in me. But I can be the most prejudiced, critical person in the world if I'm not careful, because I have been. I confess.
Amen. I understand. Trust me, I understand.
So how can I help you? I'm glad to have you here. Do you have a website that we can share today, and how can people find you on your Relevant show?
They can find Relevant, everything connected to Relevant, which is a television show, multi-generational, us talking about, God and the word works, and the fact that the word of God is real and it works in our life for real. But that's Relevant DC, www.relevantdc.com. No Walls TV. That'll be the website. We're launching October 19th, but Relevant, you can give me Relevant DC for Facebook, Relevant DC for Instagram, Relevant DC, Relevant the word works on YouTube. So anywhere that you put those in, you're going to get Relevant DC, which will eventually connect you back to me. My Instagram is my name, but Relevant DC, you see me on the website, relevantdc.com. You can find me, connect with me. But I'm just happy to be alive in this dispensation of time, because God is pouring out his spirit on us. And he said that we will prophesy and we will dream dreams and visions. Yet those dreams and visions are coming to pass right now.
Oh, the God is at work big time in the world. So I always ask this one last question, because I was voted the senior class clown in high school, and I've always been a wise guy like my older brother. So, but I like to ask this question: what was your very first job ever when you were a kid?
Babysitting. How can I remember? Babysit. I used to babysit for everybody.
And how old would you have been approximately about then, you think?
I thought it was 11 when I started babysitting.
And then did you have any particular jobs in high school? Because I sensed that you obviously, as John Maxwell, my mentor, said, leadership is influence, and you are definitely an influencer big time. So did you have a job when you were a teenager?
Yeah, my job was to sing and become a superstar. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to use but I worked at McDonald's. I stayed there for 2 weeks because it was just too much work. I was like, I don't know how anybody, it was very hard work. And I was like, I'm smarter than this. Not dismissing anybody work at McDonald's, but I was like, so I took a job as telemarketing back when that was really big. I was young. I spoke well, and I did really good at it, even in high school.
Oh, awesome. That is so cool. Well, I'm speaking with Kareemah Emordi, my guest today. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Kareemah, for being with me. This has been a very powerful time together. Thanks again, and we will definitely stay connected.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate you bringing me the Fresh Start. And I bless God for your life and what you're doing to showcase the fresh starts and the lives of people and what God can do when you turn your life over to him.